All right, Part 240, Appendix E, see it, Title 49. Appendix E, Part 240, recommended procedure for the conducting skill performance tests. The FAA requires to see that 241.27 to 242.11, the locomotive engineers be given the skill performance test prior to the certification, recertification, establishing certain criteria for conduct of the test. Railroads are given the discretion concerned with the manner of the written in this administrative required testing. The FAA afforded railroads have the discretion to allow individual railroad companies latitude. Failure of the testing procedure to specify operational reality. The appendix contains the FAA recommendation for the administration's skill performance testing that occurred during the operation and actual training that modified to serve in the instance locomotive simulator and employed with the testing purposes. The recommended practice to follow will ensure that they are more systematically an assessment of the locomotive engineer performance. The need for a systematic approach. The numerous criteria that should be bounded with the designated supervisor of locomotive engineers observing the person to determine whether the individual should be certified, recertified as a qualified locomotive engineer. The details of this criteria will verify the different classes of the service type of the railroad's terrain over which the train are to be operated with the minimum of the attention to designated supervisor for locomotive engineer should demonstrate several general areas during any of the appraisal of the compliance with the railroad operating rules, including the safety directive, the train handling rules, compliance with the federal regulations, and should be carefully monitored. But in order to effectively evaluate the employees, it is necessary to have something against which to compare with the performance. In order to holding all locomotive engineering accommodable compliance with the railroad must have the adequate operating safety for the training handling rules. Any railroad that fails to have adequate operating safety training handling rules experience the difficulty establishing an objective that of measuring the individual skill level, and railroads require the evaluation of any individual performance relative to the train handling needs for the established reform operating rules for the throttle use of the brake application, train speed. The absence of such criteria results from the lack of the meaningful yardstick for which the designated supervisor locomotive engineer to use the measuring performance of the locomotive engineer. Essential for to have the definite standards so that the engineer and any of the review about it can now have the certification candidate is being measured against. Evaluating performance, certain training operation skills will tend to occur with all the situation. For example, it would be rare to designate a supervisor of a locomotive engineers to observe any of the operating for a reasonable estimated period of time, not having some of the opportunity to review the engineer's compliance with some of the basic safety rules, the compliance with the basic operating rules, the performance of the brake test, the complexity of the operating increasing does the number of the items that the operator must comply with the higher speeds and the maintenance terrain and various signal systems place an increase for the emphasis on the need for the operator compliance with the more safety operating train handling the rules accounting with the variables and a universal monitoring scheme and immediately resolving the fair complexity system. Therefore, recommends that the designated supervisor locomotive engineers employed with written aid with the help the record events for the procedure within the minimum should be observed when conducting a skill performance test. The FRA is provided with the following information to assist the railroad in developing such written aid, such as ensuring monitoring, meaningful testing, the conducting of the skill performance test. And the designated supervisor locomotive engineer should be alerted of the following: does the employee have the necessary books and rule operations, rules, safety rules, timetables, etc.? Are they pre-departure inspection properly conducted with the radio, air brake tests, and locomotive, etc.? Does the employee comply with the applicable safety rules? Does the employee read the bulletins and general orders en route? Does the employee comply with the applicable federal rules? Monitoring gauges properly, use for the horn, whistle, and light headlight. Couple the cars at safe speed. Properly counter in the train slack or the buffing forces. Properly use the train braking system. Comply with the speed restriction display. Familiarity with the physical characteristics. Comply with signal indications. Respond properly to unusual conditions. As a conclusion of the trip, does the employee apply the handbrake to the locomotive to properly report the locomotive defects? Obviously, the less sophisticated the railroad operations are, the fewer the number of the identified practices that will be relevant. Hence, the list should be modified accordingly. The need for objectivity using observation forms. The essential for the railroad conduct of the performance skills of the testing most objective manner possible. Whenever the testing is less of the locomotive engineer initial qualification testing, periodic retesting, there will be always potential for the subject of review. The designated supervisor of the locomotive engineers conducting the testing to ensure evaluation concern competency particular individual to the handling of the position of the locomotive engineers. Steps can be taken and need to be taken too. Minimize the risk of the personal factor that adversely influence the testing procedure. One of the ways to reduce the entry of the subjective matters qualification procedure through the use of the documentation specified with the criteria for the designated supervisor, locomotive engineers, to place the emphasis on the use of the observation for which they reduce the non-eliminating subjective skill performance test on which with the contained amount of the subjectivity, the compliance from with the operating rules, safety rules, and clear of the most cases the few opportunity deviation train handling offers may options for the view of absolute right answer. The effect of the engineering applied for the train air brake for the one location rather than a few yards away does not necessarily indicate the fair and unquestioned judgment. The using of the dynamic braking versus the air brake particular location may be a question of the judgment unless the judge career previously specified the use of the preferred braking method. In any of the case, engineering judgment to apply the not applying the brake system is given in the location and is subject to the opinion of the design supervisor or the locomotive engineer. Railroads should attempt to reduce the eliminating subjective through the use of the type of the observation evaluation. Railroads developing the evaluation area of the concern with the identified with the earlier relevant instances. Railroads that do not sophisticated operation would only need a short of the subjects, and for the example, the smaller railroads would not require the items pertaining to compliance with a single rule. Compliance for the use of the dynamic brakes. Conversely, on all interests, the observations of the form should include the time, location, observing the start, date, end of the observation. The FRA believes that they should have a minimum duration, all performance skill examination. The FRA allows the railroad to select the duration appropriate for the individual circumstances, requiring that only the period of the sufficient length effectively evaluate the person in the exercising of its discretion. The FRA suggests that the minimum selected with the railroad stated in terms of distance, since the examination has sufficient duration and adequately mounted the operating skills for the variety of situation. The FRA also suggests that the format of the observation shall include the space of the recording, observing of the comments, provisions of the comments that daily would always allow the inclusion of the construction criticism without altering the import of the evaluation, would permit the subjective comments where merited. Our Appendix F of the Part 240 Medical Standards Guideline. The purpose of the appendix is to provide with greater guidance for the procedure that should employ with the administrative division and hearing requirements of 240, 121, and 240, 207. In determining whether a person has visual acuity that meets the exceeding the requirements for this part, the following testing of the protocol is deemed acceptable. Testing method to determine whether a person has ability to recognize, distinguish among the colors used in signals in the railroad industry. The acceptable test methods are shown left-hand column, and the criteria that should employ to determine whether the person has failed particular testing protocol is shown in the right-hand column. This shows the pseudo-psychochromatic plates. American Optical Company, the Hardy Rand Ritter plate, second edition. Dvorny Ishihar 1416 and 38 plate. Richmond plates, malfunction vision test, Keystone Optoscope, Optec 2000, Timaeus vision test, Timaeus 2 vision test. Any administration, any of the protocols conducting the examination should be aware of the railroad signals will always occur with a sequence that all the signals do not always appear the same. It is not acceptable to use yarn. Alright, other materials conducting simple tests determining whether the certification candidate requires the vision. No person shall be allowed to wear chromatic lenses during initial test or of the person's color vision. The initial test is conducted with accordance with one of the accepted tests in the chart, section 240.121C3. Examine who fails to meet the criteria for the chart may be further evaluated to determine with the railroad medical examiner ophthalmological referral. The federal field testing and the other particular coloring testing may be utilized depending on the experience of the examined. The railroad's medical examiner will review all pertinent information and under some circumstances may restrict an examinee who does not meet the criteria for operating the train at night during adverse weather conditions and other circumstances for the intent in 24121E is not provided with the examining with the right of the make the infinite number of the request for the further evaluation and provide examining with at least one opportunity to provide prove that the hearer of her vision test failure does not mean the examined cannot safely operate locomotive of the train. Operating further, the medical evaluation could include the providing of another approved scientific screening testing field tests. All railroads should retain the discretion to limit the number of the tests examining can request, but any capped places of the number of the retest should not be limiting retesting change, but the circumstances would be retesting the appropriate change. Circumstances would most likely occur, but the examining medical condition has improved in some way and technology has advanced to an extent with the arguable could compensate with the hearing or the vision deficiency. Engineers who wear contact lenses should have good tolerance to the lenses and should be instructed to have a pair of the corrective glasses available when on duty. And that completes 240, the appendix part that I was reading.